I have the ability to distinguish good from bad people. Good people smell good. Bad people smell bad. Only that rumored tyrannical emperor is bitter. When no one was looking, I secretly stuffed him with a lot of candy cakes. He held the cakes and said to me coldly, "The last person who gave me candy wanted me dead. What about you?" I said, "I want you to be sweet and live a long life." 1. I am the only daughter of the Minister of Rights. Since childhood, I have had the ability to distinguish good from bad people. My nose is different from others, it can smell people's scents. Good people smell good. Bad people smell bad. My father said that if others knew about this ability of mine, it would bring disaster. So I rarely went out and never talked much. It wasn't until I came of age that my parents discovered that not only was my nose different from others, but my brain was also different. The doctor said I was mentally retarded. I didn't quite understand, it probably meant I was a little stupid. From then on, my parents no longer kept me at home. They not only hired a teacher for me but also took me out for fun. I was naturally overjoyed. Lanlin, remember, if you smell someone smelling foul, don't tell anyone else. Wait until you get home and tell your parents quietly. Dad would remind me again and again every time I went out. Today was no different. But today was also different. My mother said that today was the emperor's birthday, and officials of the 4th rank and above could bring their families to the palace to celebrate. I know about His Majesty. A few days ago, when my mother and I went to the theater to see a play, I heard people talking about it. I don't remember much of what they said, but I remember that the emperor was a very, very bad person. So he must be very, very smelly. To verify this conclusion, as everyone knelt and bowed their heads in greeting, I deliberately raised my head and sniffed. Perhaps it was because no one in the room looked up. My eyes easily met his from across the crowd. It wasn't what I'd imagined. He didn't stink. He was incredibly handsome. He was as handsome as like an immortal in a painting. Before I could think, Daddy quickly pulled me down, lowering my head and prostrating myself on the ground in fear and trepidation. I knew I was wrong again. Before Daddy left, he told me not to look up at the emperor. Though I didn't understand why. I think beautiful people deserve to be looked at more. Just like the flowers in my yard, I'd happily stare at them every day. 2. The emperor didn't blame me, nor did he blame Daddy. What those people said wasn't true. He wasn't a bad person. But he wasn't a good person either. I couldn't smell anything bad about him, nor could I smell anything fragrant. It was strange. But Daddy wouldn't let me sniff it again. After stuffing a bunch of candy cakes into my arms, he asked Mom to take me to the gardens. The palace gardens were much larger than those at home. In addition to the many flowers I'd never seen before, there were also numerous rockeries. Perfect for playing hide and seek. While Mom was chatting with the ladies, I snuck into the rockeries, holding the candy cakes. I don't know if I was too good at hide and seek, or if Mom was just too clueless, but she couldn't find me for a long time. But then I ran into His Majesty the Emperor. He was standing behind a rockery, the cool moonlight falling on him. It made him look even more beautiful. I imagine if the moon immortal in the storybooks were a man, he would look like this. Across from him stood a delicate woman, her voice trembling, "Your Majesty, I am willing to give you anything you desire." "Oh? What do I desire?" The emperor laughed. The woman replied, "If your Majesty wishes to take me as your empress, the Li family will prioritize your Majesty in all matters." They exchanged many words, but I couldn't quite hear them clearly. I couldn't quite grasp them. After the woman turned and left, the emperor suddenly turned and looked at me. He was smarter than my mother. He had found me in an instant. "Your Majesty, how did you know I was hiding here?" I asked, smiling and tilting my head, as I leaped out from behind the rockery. His handsome brows knitted slightly as he approached me. Only when he approached did I smell his scent. It wasn't foul. It wasn't fragrant either. A faint bitterness. Like the bitterest medicine the doctor prescribed me when I was sick last time. 3. The emperor approached me and examined me for a moment. Finally, he asked calmly, "Are you Shenlong, the daughter of Minister Shen?" I nodded, still staring up at him. "Why does it taste bitter?" Before he could say anything else, I couldn't help but ask, "Your Majesty, have you ever eaten candy?" He seemed surprised by my sudden question and paused. When he didn't answer, I blinked again. "Why are you asking?" he asked after a long pause. Because it smelled bitter, as if he'd never tasted candy before. But Daddy said I couldn't tell anyone that I could smell people. So I took the candy cake from my arms and reluctantly gave him half. "I'll treat you to the candy cake. I just had it. This one is very sweet. It must have a lot of sugar in it." I hoped it wouldn't be so bitter for him. He looked down at the candy cake in my hand and laughed. "Shenlong, you're very brave." I smiled sweetly, "Thank you, Your Majesty, for the compliment." He was stunned again. Just then, I heard my mother calling my name anxiously from a distance. She must have been unable to find me and thought I was lost. "I'm not that stupid." I shoved the candy cake in my hand into the emperor's arms, and heard him say coldly, "Someone gave me candy cake before, but she wanted me dead." "Huh?" I jerked my head up, meeting his icy eyes. "What about you?" he asked. For some reason, he looked cold and miserable to me. Even more pitiful than the soaked puppy in the yard. I stood on tiptoe to touch his head, but he was too tall, so I could only give him a gentle hug. "I wish His Majesty a happy and long life." "Lanlan." My mother's voice grew closer. I stuck out my tongue, quickly let go of the emperor, lifted my skirt and turned back. After a few steps, I remembered I had something else to say. I turned back to the emperor, who remained frozen in place, and whispered, "That sister just lied to you. Don't believe her. Because she smelled foul. When you do something bad, the stench is especially strong." With that, I ran away without looking back, so he wouldn't ask how I knew. 4. How did you know? The emperor sat on a high chair, leaning over to look at me, his chin resting on one hand. Just now, my parents were about to take me out of the palace when they were stopped. Then I was brought to this magnificent place. The emperor and I were the only ones in the palace. I could smell the bitter odor lingering on him, and I asked, irrationally, "Your Majesty, didn't you eat the candy cake?" The emperor's beautiful eyes flickered, and he stood up. As he approached, the bitter odor on him grew stronger. "I've heard you're different." He stood before me, looking down at me with an emotion in his eyes I couldn't understand. I thought he knew I could smell people, and I swallowed nervously, but then I heard him continue, "You've reached your teen years, yet your mind hasn't opened yet. So that's what happened." I breathed a sigh of relief. But then I immediately glared and defended myself. "The teacher said I'll open soon. I could even recite poetry yesterday." The emperor laughed at this. The eunuch who had brought me in ran in, knelt not far away, and whispered, "Your Majesty, Lord Shen is kneeling outside the palace, requesting an audience." "My father." I turned to look at the eunuch. The eunuch lowered his head and said nothing. I looked back at the emperor. He ignored the eunuch and looked at me, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Your father truly loves you." I nodded vigorously, my eyes shining. "Of course, my father is the best father in the world." "And Lanlan." He leaned closer to me, calling my name softly. "How blessed. I don't have a father. So bitter." As he spoke, a strong bitterness permeated his entire being. "Then how about I let my father be your father, too?" I subconsciously coaxed him. He was slightly startled, his eyes a drop of ink, so black they seemed to draw me in. After a long moment, he asked, "Is it okay?" I nodded, "Of course." He smiled, looked up at the eunuch not far away, and said, "Let Shenfeng in." 5. I am very pleased with the gift that Lord Shen sent me today. My father had just knelt when he heard the emperor say this. Thank you, Your Majesty, for your kindness. That knight shining pearl was specially brought from the South China Sea. It's 1 in a million, Daddy replied with a kowtow. I'm not referring to that knight shining pearl, the emperor glanced at me sideways, his lips curled slightly. I am referring to your precious jewel. Dad shuddered at the words and raised his head to glance at me. After just one glance, he quickly kowtowed again, and said hurriedly, my daughter is unlike ordinary people. She has the mind of a child and acts rashly. If she has offended Your Majesty, please punish me. The emperor, still smiling, raised his hand and placed it on my head. He then said, Your Majesty, you are too modest. I believe your daughter is quite intelligent. He was the first person to compliment me on my intelligence. He must be a good man. Once the bitterness of his body dissipates, I'm sure I'll be able to smell his fragrance. Thinking of this, I smiled at him. He also looked down at me, gently rubbing the hand on my head. He whispered softly, Lanlin also asked Daddy to be my daddy, too. I smiled and nodded. But when I turned back to look at Daddy, his face was pale, and he kowtowed again. I deserve death. It's my poor parenting that has allowed her to speak nonsense in front of Your Majesty. Please punish me, Your Majesty. Daddy, I hurried over, my eyes reddened at his brow. Daddy, has Lanlin done something wrong again? I frantically blew on his forehead. Daddy pulled me aside, making me kneel with him. He continued to address the emperor, my daughter is immature and her words are rude. It's all my fault. Your Majesty, please don't blame her. The emperor walked over to us and helped me up. Lord Shen, you're too kind. The emperor smiled beautifully, his eyes still dark. I find Lanlin innocent and adorable, and what she said resonates deeply with me. Rather than punishing her, she should be rewarded. Daddy, however, collapsed to the ground as if hearing terrible news. 6. I seem to have done something wrong again. After returning from the palace, Daddy stayed awake all night, and Mother's eyes teared up as she held me. Mother, I didn't tell the emperor my secret. My eyes teared up in Mother's arms, too. The emperor had clearly said he would reward Daddy and me. Hearing this, Mother hugged me even tighter. Mother, I know. It's all Daddy and Mom's fault. I didn't understand why they were wrong. Until the next morning, an imperial edict arrived from the palace. The emperor kept his word. The palace servants brought in several boxes of gold, silver, and jewelry. After the leading eunuch finished reading the imperial edict, he said to me with a smile, Empress Chun, 3 days from now is an auspicious day, a perfect day for you to enter the palace. I looked up at him and blinked. I'm not Empress Chun, I'm Shenlan. He continued to smile, you are Empress Chun, personally conferred by His Majesty. With that, he handed the imperial edict to my father and left with the group in a grand procession. My mother, who had been holding it in all night, finally burst into tears after reading the edict. I secretly asked the maidservant beside me, Daodu, what is Empress Chun? Daodu pouted and said in a sobbing voice, it's His Majesty's concubine. My eyes rolled. Like my father and mother. Daodu was stunned, then thought for a moment, more or less. Then why were they crying? I turned my head to look at my parents and raised my hand to wipe the tears from my mother's face. Don't cry, mother. I am willing to be His Majesty's consort Chun. My mother cried even harder. Over the next 3 days, several maids came to our house. Most of them came to teach me the etiquette of entering the palace. Those etiquette were complex and difficult to learn, and I finally mastered them with some difficulty. The last maid stood before me for a long time, staring into my eyes, her face turning red, then pale, then red again. What is sex? I stared at her with wide eyes, innocent. She bit her lip and finally said, young lady, just remember, you must obey His Majesty in bed. I nodded. What about the rest of the time? You must obey, too. There's nothing special about sex. 7. On the day I entered the palace, my parents cried. I cried with them. When His Majesty arrived, I was still sniffling. He approached me and asked calmly, "Are you so scared of being my concubine Chun?" My eyes reddened as I looked up at him. He looked different today. He was wearing a bright yellow robe, which made his face look like the jade stone my father kept hidden in his study. "Your Majesty, I'm hungry," I replied with a sob. It was true. I'd been busy all day since this morning, and had only eaten 2 pieces of pastry. The emperor didn't expect me to cry about this. He paused for a moment before chuckling softly. His laugh was particularly beautiful, and its sound was also very pleasant. "Go get some food." He glanced down at me, then curled his lips and said something sweet. The eunuch guarding the door quickly agreed and hurried away. A short while later, several plates of pastries were brought in. My eyes lit up. The emperor sat down beside me. After watching me eat several pieces of pastry, he asked, "Aren't you afraid of me?" I bit into the pastry and shook my head. He didn't stink, and beneath the intense bitterness was a faint fragrance. It smelled delicious. "But they're all afraid of me," he laughed. I swallowed. "That must be because they're bad guys." As I said this, the bitterness of his body penetrated my nose, making me frown slightly. Maybe those people were afraid of him because he was too bitter. "Your Majesty, you have some too." I offered the sweetest cake to his lips, coaxing him with a smile. "This one is the sweetest." He lowered his eyes to glance at the cake, a flicker of light flickering in his dark eyes. After a moment, he slightly opened his mouth and took a nibble. Eunuch Li, standing not far away, saw this and widened his eyes. I waited for His Majesty to swallow it, then asked him, as if to take credit for it, "Is it sweet?" His beautiful lips curled up, "Sweet." I quickly stuffed the rest into his mouth, taking the opportunity to lean in close and take a deep sip. The bitterness seemed to have faded a bit. But it was only a tiny bit, and no matter how much I fed him afterwards, there was no change. Finally, he sighed, looked at the pastry I'd stuffed into his mouth, and said, rather helplessly, "Shenlong." I was stunned. "Huh? If you can't finish it, just throw it away. There's no need to stuff it all into my stomach." He glanced at Eunuch Li and said coldly, "Get out of here." But I wasn't full yet. Taking advantage of Eunuch Li's advance, I quickly grabbed 2 pieces and stuffed them into my mouth. The emperor looked at my chubby cheeks, smiled faintly, and gently pinched them. "Did Lord Shen starve you while you were at home?" "No. But I was stuffed." I was full, unable to utter a single word of defense. I could only smell the bitter scent of His Majesty's body, now slightly lighter. 8. I'm overeating. I clearly didn't eat much. The emperor stood up when I burped for the 3rd time. Mammy said that once I entered the palace, I would share the fate of the Shen family. If I made a mistake, father and mother would be punished. Thinking of this, I quickly covered my mouth to prevent another burp. "I've eaten a bit too much." "You accompany me for a walk," the emperor said calmly, noticing my shoulders trembling from the fear of burping. I immediately stood up. "Good, burp." The emperor pressed his lips lightly, turned around, and walked out. I covered my mouth in frustration and hurried to follow. Empress Chun's dress was exceptionally intricate, its layers unfurling at my feet as I walked. It looked even more beautiful than the peonies blooming along the roadside. My mind was so focused on my steps that I didn't notice the emperor, walking ahead of me, suddenly stop. "Ah!" I bumped hard into his back, losing my balance and falling backward. But before I could hit the ground, he swung around, grabbed my waist, and pulled me back. A rich bitterness, mixed with a hint of agar wood, spread over his body. It smelled wonderful. He frowned slightly, and before he could say anything, I caught a faint whiff of foul air coming from not far away. I instinctively pulled him behind a large rock. "Shoo!" Seeing he was about to speak, I quickly covered his lips with my hand. After a while, footsteps were indeed approaching. You said His Majesty went to Jingha Palace, a delicate voice rang out. It was the woman who had spoken to the emperor that day. I crouched behind the rock and cautiously peered out. The woman was dressed in a gorgeous palace gown, followed by a throng of palace servants. The leading maid lowered her head. Yes. I've been in the palace for 2 days, and haven't even seen His Majesty. How did that fool, freshly arrived, receive such favor? On what terms? The woman angrily snapped a peach branch beside her. The maid whispered, her father is the Minister of Rights, and his most proud student won the top spot in the imperial examination this year. Your Majesty must be. Before she finished, the woman interrupted, besides our Li family, who else could be his support? Your Majesty, the maid said, glancing around hurriedly. Be careful what you say. I was completely bewildered by what they were saying. I only knew they mentioned my father and the student he loved so much. After they had gone away, I looked at the emperor beside me. I obediently covered his mouth with my hand, while Eunuchly, standing behind him, looked utterly pale, as if the sky were falling. I'd made a mistake again. I quickly let go of him, my face drooping. Your Majesty, can you please punish me and not my father? He looked down at me, his lips curled slightly, and raised his hand to straighten my crooked hairpin. I won't punish you, he coaxed softly. But Lanlan, can you tell me why you knew Li Xingji was here? And why did you say she was a bad person? I blinked. He trapped me between him and the stone, lowering himself slightly. I swallowed, slipped out from under his arm, and ran back, skirt in hand. I'm a little sleepy. Time for bed. But as I lay in bed after my bath, the emperor arrived again. Afraid he'd continue questioning, I pulled the quilt over my head. Lanlan is asleep. She doesn't know a thing. After a while, the emperor's soft chuckle echoed beside me. I carefully pulled the quilt over me, revealing only my eyes as I looked at him. The candlelight behind him flickered, casting his shadow at his feet. He put his hands behind his back, leaned forward slightly, and said with a cool smile, Lanlan is so brave. She went to bed on her own if she didn't want to sleep with him. Sleeping with him? The nanny seemed to have said that sleeping with him meant sleeping with His Majesty. Today was the first time I slept away from home, and I was a little scared. But if His Majesty was willing to sleep with me, I wouldn't be afraid anymore. Thinking this, I moved closer, making room next to me, and looked at His Majesty with sparkling eyes. Lanlan is timid, so of course she's willing to sleep with His Majesty. The emperor was stunned for a moment, then his beautiful eyes curved. He asked me, does Lanlan know what sleeping with him means? Of course I do. Who are you looking down on? 9. The nanny said that in bed, you have to obey His Majesty. So when His Majesty said, don't move, I really didn't dare move. Do you really know what it means to sleep with the emperor? The emperor, seeing I remained motionless, couldn't help but ask again. I tilted my head and blinked at him. Isn't this just sleeping with the emperor now? He chuckled again, and the pleasant fragrance of agar wood emanated from his body. It didn't smell so bitter at all. Go to sleep, he whispered. I nodded, closing my eyes and then opening them again, Your Majesty. Can I move now? I couldn't sleep if I stayed still. Yes, his voice held a hint of laughter. Relieved, I relaxed, then turned sideways to face the emperor. I saw his high nose bridge and a smile on his lips. He looked so handsome. Your Majesty, I called him again. He didn't open his mouth, only a soft hum. What's your name? I turned over and stared at the curtains overhead, a little puzzled. They all call you His Majesty the Emperor. I don't think that's your name. It's like how everyone calls my father, Lord Shen, Minister Shen. The emperor opened his eyes and joined me in staring at the pitch-black, colorless curtains overhead. A strong, bitter smell washed over me. I couldn't help but tilt my head to look at him, only to see his thin lips part slightly. Q. I didn't quite catch it. He also tilted his head, his cold gaze meeting mine. My name is Q. My teacher hadn't taught me many characters, so I had no idea what the two words Q meant. But I nodded with a knowing air, imitating the others and patting Q's shoulder. What a nice name. Q's expression froze for a moment. After a moment, he removed my hand and said calmly, "Tomorrow I'll find you a teacher." Huh? Why do I still need to study? Chi kept his promise and found me a female tutor the next day. Just after the female tutor finished greeting me, a palace attendant announced that the concubine Shu had arrived. I will begin teaching your majesty tomorrow. Please excuse me for today. The female tutor didn't linger any longer. After paying her respects, she turned and left. The faint fragrance dissipated with her departure, replaced by a pervasive stench. Li Xingji, leading a group of people, passed by the female tutor and entered the palace. Bad.But told me that Li Xingji was the daughter of General Li Yu of Weibei, and the niece of the current Empress Dowager. 2 days before I entered the palace, Qi had conferred her the title of concubine Shu. She was also Qi's concubine. Why could Qi have 2 concubines? Since you have some free time today, come sit with me. I hope I'm not in your way. Li Xingji glanced at the departing female teacher and sat down on a nearby chair. A foul smell filled my nose, and I instinctively stood up to leave. Father said to stay away from people who smell bad. But before I could leave, Li Xingji grabbed my hand. She angrily demanded, "How dare you ignore me?" I was momentarily frightened, but I couldn't break free. I could only beg, "Let me go." Shenlong, who do you think you are? Don't think that just because you're favored by His Majesty, you can disregard me. She tugged at my hand firmly, sneering, "Do you really think His Majesty would like a fool like you? He's just trying to use your father. When your father is no longer useful, the first people he'll kill will be you and your father." I glared at her, lowered my head, and bit her wrist hard. After she let go of me in pain, I pulled Bad.But back a few steps and said to her, "Don't speak ill of the emperor. He won't kill me and my father." "How dare you bite me?" she exclaimed, raising her hand to slap me. I ducked and dodged, then dragged Bad.But back to the door. "You hurt me first, and then you spoke ill of the emperor. You deserve it." I stuck out my tongue at her and turned to run. But as soon as I turned, I ran into Qi. I don't know when Qi arrived. I guess Li Xingji's stench was so strong that it masked the bitterness of Qi's body. Shu Fei is truly incredibly intelligent. She's even thought about what I'm going to do in the future. Qi held me in his arms, looking at Li Xingji in the hall with a half-smile. Li Xingji's face turned pale, and she immediately knelt. That's not what I meant." Her shoulders trembled slightly, and she raised her head, her eyes red as she spoke delicately, "It's just that I've been in the palace for many days, and your majesty hasn't even visited me." Qi said nothing, simply hugging me as we walked inside. As we passed her, I couldn't help but pinch my nose. Qi asked, "What's wrong?" I instinctively replied, "She smells a bit." As soon as I finished speaking, Li Xingji's face paled even further, a look of disbelief on her face. Qi, as if he'd heard something amusing, chuckled twice before saying to Li Xingji, "Do you know why I didn't visit you?" 10. Li Xingji stumbled out of Jinghe Palace. After she left, Qi let me go. "You're quite clever. I wonder how long she'll have to wash herself when she gets home." But I wasn't happy about his praise. "Qi, why do you have 2 concubines?" I stepped back, hands on my hips, and asked him. He probably wasn't expecting my sudden question, and was stunned for a moment. Bad.But, standing behind me, gently tugged at my clothes, trying to get me to be more careful with my words. I had completely forgotten the teachings of my father and the maids, feeling only deceived. "How many concubines do you think I should have, Lanlan?" Qi's voice was soft and gentle, tinged with a hint of laughter, and very pleasant. I like him very much. I like his looks, his voice, and the faint scent of agar wood on him. That's why I'm willing to be his concubine Chun. Thinking of this, I became even more angry. Of course it's one, I glared up at him. Father only has one wife, mother. Why can you have two? He laughed again, but seeing the anger on my face, he quickly stopped. I'm different from your father, he explained. I didn't understand, why is it different? He came over, put his arm around my waist, and sat on the couch. I'm the emperor. The emperor is different from everyone else. I was even more confused. Sitting in his arms, I forgot to be angry. Isn't the emperor the most powerful person in the world? He can do whatever he wants, right? He sighed. Chiei, are you unhappy? I could smell the bitterness on him, stronger again. From yesterday to today, I've been thinking about this for a long time. It seemed like the bitterness in Chi had nothing to do with whether he ate candy or not. When he smiled, the bitterness faded. So perhaps he was so bitter because he was unhappy. He didn't answer my question. Instead, he picked up a strand of my hair and twirled it around his fingertips. He asked, Li Xingji said I took advantage of your father. Aren't you angry? I shook my head. I told you that day I'd let Daddy be your father too. He'd love you as much as he loves me. If it's good for you, Daddy would definitely do it. It wouldn't be exploitation. I turned and leaned over his shoulder, sniffing his scent. Besides, you're a good person. You wouldn't kill me or Daddy. You're the first person to say I'm a good person, Chi said softly, twirling the hair in his hand. That's because I couldn't smell your scent. I patted his back. Then I'll tell you every day from now on. Okay. The bitterness faded a little. Satisfied, I let him go and asked him again, is it true that the emperor can't have only one concubine? He laughed, not yet. I jumped off him angrily and kicked him out. 11. I heard that Li Xingji spent 2 hours bathing after returning home that day. After that, she not only searched for aromatherapy oils everywhere but also bathed every morning, noon, and night. Douda beamed as she said this, Your Majesty, if you don't make a sound, you'll be stunning once you do. I'd just heard this from the female tutor, it was probably a compliment to me. I accepted her compliment with a smug look on my face. But Your Majesty, you and His Majesty have been at loggerheads for quite some time now, Douda began to counsel me again. What if His Majesty's good temper wears off? Chi has been sending me so many rare and interesting things lately, but I've refused them all. I slumped down on the bed, pulling the covers over my head. At worst, I won't be his concubine Chun anymore. After all, he still has concubine Shu. Perhaps there will be other concubines in the future. And the female tutor said that the head of the harem is the empress. With so many concubines, Chi is truly an incredibly badass. Seeing my indignation, Douda said nothing more. She simply tucked the covers in for me and left. I don't know if I was too angry, but I had a horrible nightmare that night. I woke up terrified. I went out with my pillow, but Douda was nowhere to be found. Finally, I ran to Chi's palace. Chi's chambers were very close, and Eunuch Li, who was guarding the door, came to greet me. Empress Chun, what brings you here? The palace was dark. Chi had already gone to bed. I need to serve you, I said, sleepily, clutching my pillow. Eunuch Li regained consciousness and quickly stopped me, somewhat embarrassed. Empress, you need His Majesty to summon you to serve me. But I was afraid to sleep alone. Just as I was about to speak, a foul odor wafted from the palace. My sleepiness vanished instantly, and I pushed Eunuch Li aside and rushed in. Chi, there are bad guys. I shouted. Just then, the man standing by the bed raised his sword and began to lunge at the bed. I only had time to throw the pillow I was holding. The pillow struck the man, but it still didn't stop his sword from piercing the quilt. "Chia!" I cried. Back when I was learning needlework, even a needle pricked my hand. I wondered how much more painful it would be if such a long sword pierced Chia. The person beside the bed glanced down at my pillow, cursed, and drew their sword, lunging at me. Frightened, I took 2 steps back, tripping over the threshold. Before I hit the ground, a dark figure swooped in and pulled me into his arms. He covered my eyes with one hand and flung his dagger with the other. I heard a muffled groan, and then something hit the ground. "Drag him away," Chia's cold voice echoed above me. Surprised, I pried open the hand covering my eyes and looked up. Sure enough, it was Chia's handsome face. Eunuch Li stood not far away and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, concubine Chun has said she wants to sleep with you." Chi raised an eyebrow. He asked me, "Are you no longer angry?" Puffing my cheeks, I pulled out of his embrace, silently pulling him around to look at me. On seeing that he hadn't been pierced by the sword, I burst into tears again. He seemed frightened, his cold fingers frantically wiping the tears from my face. "Frightened? If you slept with me today, wouldn't you have encountered bad people?" I asked, tears welling in my eyes. Eunuch Li retreated silently, gently closing the palace door. The cool moonlight streamed in through the half-open window, piercing Chi's eyes. His once dark, brooding eyes seemed dotted with a few broken stars. "Shenlong." He pulled me into his arms, his hand caressing my head again and again. "Now, I know this world isn't all ghosts and schemes." I sniffed. "What are ghosts and schemes?" He chuckled. The rich scent of agar wood permeated my body. It smelled wonderful. "You don't need to know. You just need to know that you're different from everyone else." I pushed him away and asked, "Then can you have me as your only concubine?" He paused for a moment before saying, "Not yet." Such a bad guy. 12. Chi is a bit busy. I'm busy too. Every day I have to learn to read and write from the female tutor, and I'm surrounded by a group of imperial physicians, giving me acupuncture and taking medicine. I don't know if it's because I've been taking too many medicines, but lately I can hardly smell the bitterness on Chi's body. "Daudu, smell it. Am I bitter too?" I frowned as Daudu brought me the bowl of medicine. Daudu thought I didn't want to take the medicine and tried to persuade her earnestly, "Your Majesty, His Majesty is doing this for your own good. Didn't you say that memorizing has become much easier lately?" "Yes. These are medicines for mental retardation." What the imperial physicians said was not much different from what the doctors my father had called in. It's probably because my mother had a difficult birth, coupled with the fact that I'd been confined at home for over a decade, that my mind is still immature and my brain is clogged. No one wants to be stupid. I held my nose and drank the bowl of medicine. I had just popped a candied fruit into my mouth when a palace attendant hurried in. "Your Majesty, the Empress Dowager left the Buddhist temple yesterday and asked you to pay your respects to the Sinang Palace." Daudu explained that the Empress Dowager was Chi's mother. She was a vegetarian and chanted Buddhist scriptures year-round, spending half a month at the temple every year. My father was Chi's father. Chi's mother was, naturally, my mother. I quickly asked Daudu to pick out a nice dress for me to change into. After washing up, I followed the palace attendant to the Sinang Palace. "Are you concubine Chun?" The Empress Dowager smiled at me from her couch, her face kind and gentle. I bowed politely, but before I could say anything, I was struck by an indescribable odor. It was from the Empress Dowager. "The Empress Dowager asked you a question, and you dared not answer." Li Xingji, observing this, snapped. Her stench, mixed with that of the Empress Dowager, filled the palace, making me feel a little uncomfortable. But Daudu had repeatedly told me the rules on the way here. She was afraid I'd make another mistake. I had originally assumed that the Empress Dowager, being Chi's mother, would be just like Chi. Now it seems that's not the case. I whispered, "Your Highness, I'm concubine Chun." Good girl, you're so lovely. No wonder the emperor loves you. The Empress Dowager smiled. Come sit next to me. I looked up at her, then at Li Xingji, whose face was filled with resentment. We were both bad people, yet so different. I obediently sat next to the Empress Dowager. She took my hand and said to Li Xingji, "You go back first." Li Xingji glared at me, her face full of reluctance, but she still bowed and left. After she left, the Empress Dowager asked me, "Tell me, do you like the emperor?" "Of course I do." Seeing me nod, she continued, "I heard the emperor was assassinated a few days ago. You were there. You must have been terrified, right?" I shook my head. Alas, I spent half a month in the Buddhist temple, and when I came out, I saw the emperor had lost a lot of weight. As she spoke, she raised her hand, and a palace attendant brought over a small bottle. "You don't know, but the emperor hasn't been by my side since he was young, and he has some misunderstandings about me," she said sadly. "Seeing you by his side, I'm very relieved. This is the medicine I found for his heart disease, but he refuses to take it. Can you help me find a way to get him to take it?" I glanced at the small porcelain bottle. "Does His Majesty have a heart disease?" I asked. She nodded. "He's had it since he was young. Every attack is excruciatingly painful. If he doesn't take this medicine, he probably won't live for many years. I'm at my wit's end, so I'm asking for your help. Only a few years to live." My eyes widened. "He hates me, so he won't touch anything that belongs to me. Don't ever tell me I gave it to you." 13. When Xia came to find me, I was already lying down. Seeing him approach me, I moved closer to make room for him. He sat down beside the bed and asked, "Did you go to the Queen Mother today?" I got up and sat on the bed. "QE, the Queen Mother said you have a heart condition." The Queen Mother is a bad person, and I was afraid she was lying. He paused, then nodded under my nervous gaze. "Does it hurt?" I crawled over to him and reached out to grope his chest. It was hard. It looked nothing like me. He grabbed my hand with amusement and gently pulled me into his arms. "Lanlin, blow on me, and the pain will go away." His eyebrows were curved, and he looked much more beautiful than when I first met him. I nodded, found a comfortable spot in his arms, and began blowing on his chest. After just 2 breaths, he raised his hand to cover my mouth. Before I could react, he rolled me out of his arms and placed me back on the bed. His eyes were dark, his brows and eyes soft as the warmth of the sun melting snow. His prominent Adam's apple rolled slightly. "Is it no longer painful?" I asked vaguely. He quickly let go and sat up in bed. After a long while he sighed. The scent of agarwood was strong, tinged with a hint of sweetness. "Lanlin," his voice was somehow hoarse. "Have you been taking your medicine properly lately?" Speaking of this made me angry. "Do you think I'm too stupid?" I asked him angrily. He looked down at me, chuckled as if helplessly, and gently stroked my eyebrows with his fingers. "Lanlin isn't stupid. But I hope you grow up quickly." "Nonsense. I'm already a 15-year-old. Just as I got up, ready to argue with him, I caught a glimpse of the small porcelain bottle I'd hidden in the corner of the bed. I'd almost forgotten what I was doing. "With your heart disease, if you don't take medicine, won't you have many years left to live?" I stared at him, asking earnestly. He didn't expect me to keep asking this question, and for a moment he didn't know what to say. I poked my head out and glanced around, making sure we were alone in the hall. Then I pulled the small porcelain bottle from the corner of the bed and gave it to him. "Take a look. Can this medicine cure your heart disease?" He took the bottle, opened it, and sniffed it. "Yes," he said calmly. I was stunned. Have I wrongly accused the Queen Mother? But it's poisoned. He'll die before his heart disease heals. He looked up at me. "Did you take it from the Queen Mother?" I nodded, angrily. I knew she was a bad person. The bitterness that had just emanated from him dissipated upon seeing me like this. He smiled and asked, "How did you know?" Of course I smelled it. But I can't tell you. Chia, she's your mother. How could she be so mean? I was truly furious. Even a needle prick would normally send my mother trembling with pain. Why would Chia's mother give him a fatal poison? Chia sneered. This time, the bitterness emanating from him was incredibly intense. So bitter that I couldn't help but hug him and gently pat his back. It's okay, Chia. My mother will definitely love you, I soothed him with heartache. I will love you too. Now I understand. His bitterness wasn't from not having any candy or being unhappy. We lay together in bed, neither of us speaking. I could only smell the bitter scent emanating from him, enveloping him completely. I've been motherless since I was a child. I don't know how long it took before I heard him speak. I tilted my head to look at him. His eyes were open, looking somewhere unclear, their dark pupils particularly cold in the night. Back then, she was favored by my father and forcibly brought into the palace. She bore me the first time. She hated me and cast me into the cold palace. My father hated me too and ignored me. His voice was low and hoarse. In the 3rd year, they had another child. That child was pampered from childhood, the lauded crown prince. She was the one she would even use me as a knife to protect. We're both her children, so why am I just an ant to be trampled upon, while that child sits high and mighty, waiting only to ascend to the throne? Since I'm the ruthless and unjust Prince of Yen, a traitor to be punished by all, then I covered his mouth. It was so bitter. Bitter than all the medicine I'd ever taken combined. I had candied fruit, but he had none. I couldn't help but lean forward and kiss the corner of his red eye. He trembled slightly, looking at me in disbelief. I tilted my head to look at him. You are the wise and mighty emperor. Years ago, I heard from the servants in your palace that there are fewer beggars on the streets now. I think it must be all thanks to you. 14. I finally learned the character E. The female teacher didn't explain it much when she taught me. Perhaps because she knew it was Chi's given name, she hesitated to elaborate. But I loved it. I wrote Chi's name all over the page. While I was admiring my masterpiece, Chi walked in. He had arrived before me, radiating the fragrance of agar wood, tinged with a hint of SW. Eatness. Chi, look, I proudly showed him my handwriting. This is my best. A couple of days ago, he said my handwriting looked like it was crawling with ants. Today, he'd be astonished. His eyes lit up and he smiled. You're probably the only person in the world who dares to call me by my name, and write it all over a sheet of paper. I sat on his lap and placed the handwriting on the desk. So your E is this E? I said it's a good name. I like it very much. He glanced at the handwriting, because it's easy to write. With just a few strokes, it was indeed much easier to write than the other E characters. Feeling a little guilty, I feigned composure. No, not at all. He didn't expose me again. Instead, he picked up his pen and wrote several more Shenlong characters in the gaps between the paper, filling the entire sheet completely. I was so pleased that I even thought of finding a place to hang it up. Your Majesty, Lord Shen is here. Eunuch Li walked in, glanced up at me, his expression softening. Madam Shen is here too. This was the first time my mother had come to see me since I entered the palace. Chi went to see my father in the imperial study, while my mother was led into Jinghe Palace by palace servants. Lanlin. My mother's eyes welled up upon seeing me. She pulled me aside and looked me around. Have you been wronged in the palace? I nodded. My mother's eyes reddened even more. But Your Majesty. It's him, I said angrily, pulling my mother to sit down. He said I can't be his only concubine for the time being, and he said he's different from my father. Mother, please help me talk to him. My mother's hand trembled, and the worry in her eyes suddenly dissipated. Besides, he always comes to bed late. Sometimes he comes after I'm asleep. Also, he's not suffering any more now, but the medicine he feeds me is always bitter, and he even lies to me that it isn't. I rattled off all his crimes. The more Mother listened, the more she felt something was amiss. Finally, she looked me over and said, with a cryptic tone, "No wonder you've gained weight." Not really. I gave half of my daily cakes and candies to Chia. Not only didn't Mother feel sorry for me, but before she left, she urged me, "Be good to His Majesty." I had a misconception. It seemed Mother felt even more sorry for Chia. When I told Chia this, he laughed for a long time. Finally, he hugged me and whispered, "Lanlan, I can't wait any longer. The show has to begin." 15. Chia is ill. The imperial physician said it looked like a worsening of his heart disease, but also like poisoning. I stayed by Chi's bedside for days, crying until my eyes dried. The imperial physicians couldn't find a way to save him. Even more anxious than I was Li Xingji. She not only sought out doctors from the public but also invited Taoist priests to perform rituals. But no matter how she tried, Qi wouldn't wake up. Because she believed in witchcraft, the Empress Dowager had her dragged into the cold palace at her command. That night, the imperial physicians withdrew from the palace. All the palace attendants stood guard outside, leaving only Qi and me inside. The wind whistled past the window. The Empress Dowager slowly walked in. She still had a kind face, the marks of time etched even a gentler hue on her beautiful face. "This day has finally arrived," she said, standing in the candlelight, her voice as hoarse as the candle itself. I glanced sideways. "Was the medicine you gave him poisoned? Everyone says you're stupid and insane." She took a few steps forward, gazing at me dimly. "I never thought your pure heart would be the only thing that could lower his guard. Did you really think that if you didn't give him the medicine, everything would be fine?" She smiled, her gentle expression cracking, revealing a hint of viciousness. "You fostered a certain greed in him. With you, he wants to live even more. Where there's desire, there's a gap." I slumped to the ground. "Why would you do this to him? He's your child." "He's not," she retorted sharply. "He's misfortune, a shame, a punishment sent down upon me by heaven." My tears, already exhausted, were now thick with tears, and I quickly covered the ears of the person on the bed. But the strong bitter taste still lingered. Qi opened his eyes, his thin, pale lips moving slightly. "So you want to kill me?" The Queen Mother was caught off guard by this sudden change and took 2 steps back in shock. "You?" Qi sat up, his gaze fixed on her coldly. "So when I was praised by my father, you gave me a poisoned candy cake. So when I killed everyone who stood in Qi Tsong's way, you made him kill me first when he ascended to the throne." The Queen Mother pointed at him, furious. "You're not worthy of mentioning Tsonger." Qi laughed. I looked at him with heartache, only to see his eyes flushed, as if blood were about to drip. "You don't think you've hidden it well, do you?" His voice was as cold as winter snow. "Do you think the Li family won't show some sincerity if Li Xingji enters the palace?" The Queen Mother was stunned for a moment, then a thought struck her. "What have you done? You've been watching me day and night, wishing me dead soon. Have you forgotten the kind of people your mother's family is?" He spoke each word with measured emphasis. "For the position of Empress, the Li family would do anything. Have you forgotten how you entered the palace? What did you do to my Yenna?" the Queen Mother muttered in disbelief, turning to leave. Qi laughed. "Of course, like his father, he accidentally fell into the lake. Drowned." The Queen Mother fell to the ground, looking at Qi in disbelief. "You devil. I should have strangled you back then. Compared to you, Mother, I'm still a little less capable." 16. The Li family was sentenced to death for murdering the former crown prince's orphan. The Empress Dowager, instigated by treacherous individuals, plotted against the emperor and was eternally imprisoned in the Buddhist temple. The female tutor had just taught me this tactic. Removing the firewood from under the cauldron. You've caused our Lanlan to shed so many tears, she's lost weight. Chia held me in his arms, his large hand squeezing my waist. I feigned a nod. Then you have to compensate me. What does Lanlan want? I thought about it. I want you to have me as your only concubine. Okay, he finally gave a different answer than before. Not as a concubine, but as the empress. My mood brightened and I patted his shoulder. Then you're allowed to sleep with me today. His eyes darkened. Daudu and Eunuch Li beside him lowered their heads, their lips pressed together. Lanlan, do you really know what it means to sleep with me? Chia asked me after a long pause. I know. Isn't it just sleeping? This sleep is not the same as that sleep. The female teacher's face flushed red, and after coughing several times, she handed me a few booklets. The booklets were filled with men and women intertwined, and I had no idea what they were doing. Looking at my eager eyes, the female teacher's ears turned red. Tell your majesty, I really can't teach you any more. With that, she fled Jinghe Palace like a flash. And something that even a female teacher couldn't teach must be very difficult. This intensified my interest in these booklets. I didn't even notice when Chia arrived. Chia took the booklets from my hands. His beautiful eyes seemed to be filled with spring water, and his sweet fragrance suddenly made me thirsty. Lanlan, there's nothing you don't understand. I'll teach you. Even his voice was like a falling feather, sweeping across my heart. On the tip. I felt an inexplicable unease. Zi saw my ears blush and chuckled softly. Lanlan seems to have grown up. This night was different from any other. The candlelight flickered softly, casting shadows on the tousled dresses on the floor. I felt like I'd been thrown into the clouds, and I didn't know how long it took for the wave to stop. Having drifted off, I hugged Zi and murmured, Zi, you're finally not bitter anymore. What do you mean you're not bitter anymore? It's about taste. Good people are fragrant, bad people are smelly, but Zi is bitter. Zi buried his head in the crook of my neck. A long, long time passed, and as I was about to fall asleep, I heard him whisper, because Lanlan is sweet. Like a piece of melted candy, it turns the bitter into sweet.